what makes it interesting as money is that if you're trying to move money globally, right? If you try to bring gold through an airport, try to bring physical cash dollars through an airport, you're going to get all these checkpoints, all these ways to stop you, capital controls. The interesting thing about Bitcoin as a technology stack is you can memorize 12 words in your head, and you have like your slot on this decentralized cloud of money that you can then go around the world and eventually reconstruct your ability to access that, right? Or you can just send it to people, peer to peer in a way that it's challenging to stop. There are regulations and things that can try to slow it down around the margins, the fiat on and off ramps, but the actual network itself is rather interesting and kind of offers novel characteristics that a lot of other monies, basically haven't been able to offer.
Although Bitcoin's use as a global currency is expanding, questions persist about the cryptocurrency's intrinsic value and the possibility of widespread adoption. The world of cryptocurrencies is in a constant state of flux. The emperor's lack of clothes has been questioned even more recently in light of recent scandals in the cryptocurrency industry. Kitco News recently hosted two economists, George Selgin and Lyn Alden, who will be debating each other live and interactively on this topic. According to Selgin, a senior fellow at the Cato Institute and former director of its Center for Monetary and Financial Alternatives, Bitcoin does not conform to the economist's definition of money. Against this is Lyn Alden, who created the Lyn Alden investment strategy. She is a seasoned macroeconomist who advocates for Bitcoin as a medium of exchange and a form of money. She is widely regarded as a credible expert in the financial markets due to her insightful economic forecasts. Beginning the debate, George Selgin argued that Bitcoin is not yet widely accepted as a medium of exchange, which is a necessary condition for it to be considered money. He said that while Bitcoin's popularity and acceptance have grown since its inception, it still has a way to go before it can be widely used as currency. However, Lyn Alden argued that Bitcoin is becoming more widely accepted and scalable than alternative currencies. Despite the discrepancy between Bitcoin's widespread acceptance and the proportion of businesses willing to accept it as payment, she insisted that the cryptocurrency was on its way to becoming mainstream money. Similarly, Selgin raised concerns and Alden stated that market forces determine the value of Bitcoin just like any other asset. Let's dive into the video and hear about the heated discussion between these two titans of the economics community.
Now, the test for whether something's money is therefore whether you can go shopping with it with low search costs, where you can pretty much go into any shop or online these days, and whatever you're looking for, if you're equipped with this stuff, the seller's going to take it. My point about Bitcoin is very simple. It's that in most places, the vast majority of sellers aren't going to take it from you, or to put it perhaps a little bit more cleanly, there's something else, some other asset that they are much more likely to accept. And these days, that's usually whatever the local fiat money is. And just one more point. Now, what Lyn said was that Bitcoin is high on the salability list relative to all the other non-fiat currencies that are in use in the world. In any particular place, it's high on the list of alternatives. And that's true, but that still can be consistent with there being a big gap between its acceptability and the number of merchants, sellers who will trade for it, and the number who will trade for the local fiat money. So in that sense, these two tweets are reconcilable.
Okay.
Finally, I do think Bitcoin has made a lot of gains in acceptability, certainly since it was introduced. So my statement doesn't necessarily exclude it becoming money in more places in the future.
Okay, Lyn, I'll give you a chance to respond.
I think probably along similar lines that I don't really disagree with anything that George said. At least in that description. And the way I'd phrase it is that, as he put it, basically you want to solve the barter problem. And the shortcoming of fiat currencies is that you only solve the barter problem in a local sense, right? So for example, in Egypt, Egyptian pounds solve the barter problem. It's a widely accepted medium of exchange there. But if you're in Canada, Egypt pounds are a terrible medium of exchange. Basically, they're only money in Egypt, maybe a couple border countries. You can get some degree of salability there, and the salability rapidly falls away outside of the local monopoly. So when you have 180 different currencies, I think something like 130 of them are free floating. The other ones are pegged, and therefore, pegs can break. You basically have a barter system globally, and only a handful of monies that basically tie them together. You have the global reserve currency. It used to be British pounds. Now it's dollars. You have gold coins. If you bring a gold coin with you, you can pretty much go anywhere. And my argument is essentially that if you look at, in a global sense, global bearer assets, what are the top 10 monies that you could bring with you that would be among the easiest to either get a vendor to sell you something for them, or at least that you could then convert into the local system fairly easily, right? So for example, I have Norwegian kroner and Egyptian pounds in New Jersey, and basically they're less saleable here than Bitcoin is, for example. And that's true for a lot of places, suburbs and urban centers around the world, even though of course they're both highly saleable in their host jurisdictions, which is essentially an artificial monopoly. But that's the current technology stack that the world uses for lack of something better. And so my overall view is that, and it doesn't really disagree with George in that sense, is that it's an emerging money. It's not as saleable as, say, gold coins or physical cash dollars globally, for example. But I would say that the trend is very much up, and that it's already, if you look at, again, there's 180 fiat currencies, and then a bunch of other commodities. It's in the, I'd argue, the top 10, even after only a 14-year lifespan, let alone having a good.
Being money is a market phenomenon. Money is a market phenomenon. That is, whether something's money or not is not a function of what its physical characteristics are. It's a function of what people do with it. And therefore, when we want to know if something's money, we can't simply look at it and say, well, it's got this physical feature or that physical feature. It's capable of this, capable of that. We must ask, who is doing what with it? And particularly, we have to ask, how easy is it for you to walk into the store next door and buy what you want, offering this stuff? That's a market characteristic, not a physical characteristic.
The way I would phrase it is that, so I agree with that, but I would say that the physical characteristics eventually dictate what the market does with it. For example, shells were money back when, tribes had similar levels of technology, and basically nobody could cheat the system. But once someone comes and invents metal tools and, industrial revolution, anybody who's still trying to use shells as money is going to have a really bad time, because there's other people that can then rapidly expand the supply of your money, and you're going to get wrecked essentially. And so, properties eventually dictate market use. And so that's why you want to both take into account the properties of something, but then also identify, you look for market signals. Is this thing actually being used as money? Is the trend higher or lower? What is current relative value compared to money? And so, that's why a Picasso is just never going to be a very good form of money, because even though it's a store of value, it's intrinsically rare, it's interesting, but it just lacks good properties to be any sort of medium of exchange, any sort of fungibility, any sort of liquidity. Basically it's not a saleable good. It's buying and selling a Picasso is a very challenging process. Getting it authenticated, finding a wealthy buyer, it's a very challenging process. And so I would essentially describe that money is basically a ranking of saleability of different goods, and properties heavily dictate what is in practice a very saleable money. And then it just becomes a matter of more and more market participants realizing its properties, testing its properties, seeing how those properties hold up, and then different technology trends over time can potentially break the saleability of some sort of monies. That's kind of been the history of commodity monies. That's why gold's kind of the last one standing. That's the one that we just don't know how to make more of in any sort of rapid pace. Whereas shells, beads, furs, cattle, salt, we can make all these things pretty rapidly, and we can sharply change their stock to flow ratios. Whereas gold, and to a lesser extent silver, hold up a lot better in that regard. And so Bitcoin, I think, has the properties of being good money. And then in a market sense, as we discussed earlier, it's got pretty good salability, especially when you look at it at a global sense.
There is no doubt that the discussion about the value of money and the place of cryptocurrency in our economy that has been sparked by the debate between Lyn and George has been beneficial. The growth of Bitcoin's popularity and utility in the years to come should be fascinating. How do you feel about the Bitcoin discussion? Is it money or just speculation to you? Use the comment section below to weigh in on the discussion. Please hit the like button, share this video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to be notified when we upload new videos to Market Empire.